The morning they threw her out, Clara Whitmore understood what it meant to be worthless in the eyes of the world. Standing in the rain outside Ravenshire Park, the estate where she'd spent 5 miserable years as a wife in name only, she watched servants carry out her few belongings while her late husband's cousins sneered from the doorway. No carriage, no farewell. Just the cold reality that a widow without fortune had no place in society's grand design. But what those aristocrats didn't know was that the woman they dismissed would soon become the most powerful duchess in England, and the scandal of her rise would shake the very foundations of their world. If you want to see how a woman with nothing defied an empire of privilege and won, stay with us until the end. And if you're watching from London, Manchester, or anywhere across the globe, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. This is a story you won't forget. The autumn wind cut through Clara's thin mourning dress like a blade as she stood at the iron gates of Ravenshire Park for the last time. Behind her, the gray stone mansion rose against the October sky, imposing, cold, and utterly indifferent to her departure. Ahead lay only the narrow dirt road that wound through bare fields toward the dower cottage, a cramped structure she'd glimpsed once from a carriage window. It had looked abandoned even then. "You'll find everything in order, Mrs. Whitmore," said Mr. Pemberton, her late husband's solicitor, his voice professionally detached. He didn't meet her eyes. No one had really, since Thomas Whitmore had been found dead in his study 3 weeks prior. "The cottage has been prepared. You'll receive your widow's portion quarterly. £15. £15, 4 times a year. £60 annually to survive on." Clara said nothing. There was nothing to say. She'd learned during 5 years of marriage that silence was often the only dignified response to indignity. "The carriage will take you there now," Pemberton continued, gesturing to a small, weather-beaten coach that looked like it had been pulled from storage specifically for this purpose. Of course it had. The family's good carriages, her late husband's carriages, now belonged to Cornelius Whitmore, Thomas's second cousin and the new master of Ravenshire Park. Cornelius himself stood on the front steps of the house, watching her departure with barely concealed satisfaction. He was a thick-necked man of 40, with thinning hair, and the kind of face that always looked slightly sweaty, even in cold weather. He'd arrived the day after Thomas's funeral, already talking about necessary changes and proper management. Within a week, he'd made it clear that Clara's presence was neither necessary nor proper. "A young widow," he'd said to her during their single private conversation, his eyes sliding over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tragic, of course. But you understand the position. The estate requires a firm hand, a man's hand. And you, well, you have no real connection to the Whitmore name, do you? No children to bind you to us." The cruelty of it had been almost refreshing in its honesty. For 5 years, Thomas had treated her like an inconvenient piece of furniture, necessary to maintain appearances, useful for hosting the occasional dinner party, but never truly seen, never truly valued. He'd married her because her father, a country parson of modest reputation, had once saved Thomas's life during a coaching accident. The marriage had been Thomas's way of repaying that debt. Nothing more. "I expect you thought you'd have children," Thomas had told her once, 3 years into their marriage, when she'd finally worked up the courage to ask why he never came to her chambers. "I expect you thought this would be a real marriage." His tone had been almost pitying. "But you see, Clara, I married you out of obligation. I fulfilled my promise to your father. I gave you a home, a name, a position. What more could you possibly want? Love," she'd thought. Partnership. A life. But she'd said nothing then, just as she said nothing now. The carriage rattled and swayed over the rutted road. Clara sat alone in the dim interior, her hands folded in her lap, watching the familiar landscape slide past the window. These fields, these woods, these low stone walls. She'd walked among them countless times during her marriage, seeking solace in nature when the house became too suffocating. She'd taught herself about the plants that grew wild in the hedgerows. Chamomile for calm, valerian for sleep, yarrow for wounds. Simple remedies, but they'd given her something to focus on beyond the emptiness of her days. Now even that small freedom was ending. The dower cottage sat on the very edge of the estate, bordering the lands of Thornbridge, the vast ducal holding to the west. She'd be isolated there, cut off from even the minimal social contact she'd had at Ravenshire Park. Not that society would miss her. She'd always been an outsider in their world. Too poor, too common, too quiet. The local gentry had been polite to her face because she was Mrs. Thomas Whitmore. But she'd seen the way they looked at her, the barely concealed pity, the whispered speculation about why such a promising man had tied himself to such an unremarkable woman. She must have trapped him somehow, she'd once overheard at a garden party. Why else would a Whitmore marry a nobody? The cottage came into view as the road crested a small hill. It was worse than she remembered, a squat building of gray stone with a sagging roof and windows so small they looked like suspicious eyes. The garden was overgrown, the gate hung crooked on its hinges, and the whole structure seemed to huddle against the wind as if ashamed of its own existence. The driver, a young man she didn't recognize, helped her down and deposited her single trunk on the doorstep without a word. He was back in the carriage and rattling away before she'd even found the key Pemberton had pressed into her hand. Clara stood alone in the weeds of the front path, looking at what was now her entire world. The key stuck in the lock. She had to force it, the metal grinding and scraping, before the door finally swung inward with a groan that sounded almost human. The smell hit her immediately. Damp, mildew, and something worse underneath, something that suggested small animals had lived and died here without interruption. The interior was a single large room with a narrow staircase leading up to what she assumed was a bedroom. The furniture consisted of a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, and a cabinet that listed noticeably to one side. The fireplace was full of old ashes. The floor was dirty, and in the fading afternoon light filtering through those inadequate windows, everything looked gray and hopeless. Clara set down her trunk and walked slowly to the center of the room. She turned in a circle, taking it all in. The water stains on the ceiling, the gap under the door where cold air whistled through, the cobwebs draped across the rafters like funeral shrouds. This was it. This was what her life had become. 24 years old, widowed, discarded, alone. Something broke inside her then. Not dramatically, but quietly, like a thread stretched too far, finally giving way. She sank down onto one of the chairs and stared at nothing in particular. For 5 years she'd endured. She'd been patient, dutiful, accepting. She'd told herself that this was simply her lot in life, that she should be grateful for a roof over her head and food on her plate. She'd swallowed every small humiliation, every lonely night, every dismissive word, because that was what good women did. They endured. But sitting in this miserable cottage, breathing air that tasted of decay, Clara felt something new stirring beneath the layers of learned submission. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. Something colder, harder, more dangerous. She was done enduring. The thought appeared fully formed, startling in its clarity. She was done accepting what others decided she deserved, done making herself small to fit into spaces that had never wanted her, done waiting for her life to have meaning. But what could she do? She had no money beyond her meager allowance, no family to turn to. Her father had died 2 years ago, her mother long before that. She had no skills that society valued, no connections, no power. She had nothing. Except, Clara stood abruptly, her heart suddenly racing. She walked to the window and looked out at the overgrown garden. Beyond it, fields stretched toward a line of trees. And beyond those trees, if she remembered the maps correctly, lay the lake that marked the boundary between the old Whitmore lands and Thornbridge. She'd walked to that lake once, early in her marriage, when the house had felt especially suffocating. It had been beautiful, peaceful, and isolated, surrounded by willows whose branches trailed in the water like green curtains. She'd sat there for hours, watching dragonflies skim the surface, feeling something close to contentment. What if she went back? What if instead of hiding in this cottage, waiting to fade into complete obscurity, she claimed some small piece of the world for herself? The lake was technically on estate land. She had every right to walk there. And if she happened to gather some of the plants that grew along its banks, plants she could study and perhaps use. It was a small rebellion. Tiny, really, but it was hers. Clara felt a smile tug at her lips, the first genuine smile in weeks. She would survive this, somehow, and she would do it on her own terms. Ishan. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Clara woke in the cottage's upstairs bedroom, a cramped space with a sloped ceiling and a bed that creaked ominously, and immediately set about making the place livable. She had no servants, no help of any kind. So she built a fire in the grate, heated water in the battered pot she found in the cabinet, and scrubbed the floors on her hands and knees until her back ached and her hands were raw. It felt good, purposeful, real. By afternoon, the cottage was clean, if not comfortable. She'd aired out the rooms, washed the windows, beaten the dust from the one threadbare rug. The work had left her exhausted, but oddly satisfied. This was her space now, small and shabby, yes, but hers to shape. She made herself a simple dinner of bread and cheese from the provisions that had been left in the cabinet, Cornelius's idea of generosity, no doubt, and ate while watching the sun set through the western window. Then, as dusk gathered, she pulled on her cloak and stepped outside. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke from some distant chimney. Clara stood in the cottage garden, breathing deeply, feeling the tension of the day ease from her shoulders. Then she set off toward the trees. The path was barely visible, overgrown with brambles and tall grass, but she remembered the way. Through the field, across a small stream via stepping stones, into the woods where oak and ash trees grew thick. The dying light filtered through the branches in golden shafts, illuminating her way. And then, suddenly, the trees opened up, and there it was. The lake. It was just as she remembered, perhaps more beautiful in the autumn light. The water was dark and still, reflecting the sky like polished obsidian. Willows ringed the near shore, their branches now bare but still graceful. Cattails grew in thick clusters at the water's edge. And everywhere the quiet sounds of nature settling in for the night, the whisper of wind through dry reeds, the distant call of a bird. Clara walked to the water's edge and crouched down, trailing her fingers through the cold water. It felt like baptism, like washing away the old life. I wondered if I'd imagined it, she murmured to herself. Something this beautiful. It's real enough. Clara jerked upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. She spun around. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, half-shadowed by the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in riding clothes that were well made, but not ostentatious. His hair was dark, his face angular and sharp, and he was watching her with an expression of frank curiosity. "Forgive me," he said, raising one hand in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to startle you. I come here most evenings. I've never encountered anyone else." Clara's mind raced. She should run. A woman alone meeting a strange man in an isolated place. Every rule of propriety screamed danger. But something in his posture, in the genuine apology in his voice, made her pause. I didn't know anyone else came here," she said carefully. He smiled slightly. "The lake sits between two estates. I walk from Thornbridge. You must have come from Ravenshire Park." Thornbridge. Clara's breath caught. "This man. You're the Duke," she said. "Adrian Vale." He inclined his head. "And you are?" She hesitated. Admitting her name and admitting her position. The cast-off widow, the woman deemed so worthless she'd been exiled to a cottage. But lying felt worse somehow. "Clara Whitmore," she said quietly. Recognition flickered across his face. "Thomas Whitmore's widow." "Yes." They stood in silence for a moment, the awkwardness stretching between them. Clara waited for the pity, the dismissal, the polite excuse to leave. That's what any gentleman would do. Acknowledge her, express condolences, retreat. But the Duke didn't move. "I heard about your husband's passing," he said. "I'm sorry." The conventional words, but his tone was neutral, neither warm nor cold, as if he understood that not all marriages were worth mourning. "Thank you," Clara said, because she had to say something. Another silence. The wind picked up, sending ripples across the dark water. "Do you mind if I stay?" Adrian asked. "I promise not to intrude further. I just find this place peaceful." Clara should say no, should make her excuses and flee back to the cottage, should remember her place. But she thought of the cold, empty rooms waiting for her, the long night ahead with nothing but her own thoughts for company. And she looked at this man who'd asked permission to share the same piece of earth, as if her answer mattered. "I don't mind," she heard herself say. Adrian nodded and walked, not toward her, but to a large, flat rock several yards away along the shore. He sat down, leaning back on his hands, his gaze turned toward the water. Clara, after a moment's hesitation, sat down where she was, on the grass near the willows. They remained like that as the light faded, two people in the same space, sharing the same silence but making no demands of each other. It was the strangest thing Clara had ever experienced, and somehow, in that strangeness, she felt more at peace than she had in 5 years of marriage. She went back the next evening, and the evening after that. It became a ritual, unspoken but understood. As the sun began its descent, Clara would walk through the fields and woods to the lake, and Adrian would already be there, sitting on his rock, waiting for nothing in particular. They rarely spoke, a greeting when she arrived, a farewell when one of them left, sometimes a comment about the weather or the wildlife, a heron they'd both spotted, a fox that had darted through the underbrush, but mostly silence, companionable and undemanding. Clara had never known anything like it. Every interaction in her previous life had carried weight, expectations, judgments, social calculations. With Adrian, there was none of that. He asked nothing of her, expected nothing. He simply existed in the same space, and somehow that was enough. A week passed. The weather turned colder. Clara brought a blanket to sit on. Adrian started a small fire in a ring of stones, feeding it with deadfall from the woods. And then, on the 8th evening, he spoke beyond pleasantries. "What do you know about willow bark?" he asked. Clara looked up, startled. She'd been examining a piece of the tree's bark, turning it over in her hands. Some. Why? You've been studying it every time you come here. I wondered if it was simple curiosity or something more." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't realized he'd been paying that much attention. "It has medicinal properties. For pain, fever. The ancients used it." "Do you study plants often?" The question was casual, but Clara sensed genuine interest beneath it. She hesitated, then decided there was no harm in honesty. Who would he tell? Who would care? "I taught myself," she said, "during my marriage. There wasn't much else to occupy my time, and I found I had an aptitude for it, recognizing plants, understanding their uses." "That's remarkable." Clara gave a short, bitter laugh. "Hardly. It's useless knowledge for someone like me." "Why useless?" "Because I'm a widow with no position and no prospects. What good is knowing about herbs when I can barely afford food?" The words came out more harshly than she'd intended. She looked away, embarrassed by the outburst. But Adrian didn't seem put off. "Knowledge is never useless," he said quietly, "especially knowledge that comes from genuine passion. I can hear it in your voice when you speak about the plants. That's rare." Clara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. When was the last time anyone had spoken to her this way? Not with pity or dismissal, but with respect? "What about you?" she asked, daring to turn the conversation. "Why do you come here? Surely a duke has better things to do with his evenings." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I inherited the title 2 years ago when my brother died. Riding accident. He was thrown, broke his neck." He paused. "We weren't close. He was the heir, groomed for it. I was the spare, left to pursue my own interests. When he died, everything changed. Suddenly, I was the duke. Suddenly, I had responsibilities I'd never wanted, and a household looking to me for leadership I didn't know how to provide." He looked up, meeting her eyes across the firelight. "I come here because it's the only place where I'm just a man. Not a title, not a burden, just Adrian." The vulnerability in his words struck Clara like a physical blow. Here was the Duke of Thornbridge, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in England, and he was lonely, just like her. "I understand," she said softly. And she did. Something shifted between them in that moment, an invisible line crossed. They were no longer two strangers sharing space. They were two people who'd seen each other's hidden wounds. "Tell me more about the plants," Adrian said after a while. "Teach me what you know." And Clara, for the first time in years, felt genuinely seen. So she taught him. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened into early winter, she showed him how to identify different species, explain their properties, their uses. She told him about the lavender that could calm anxiety, the peppermint that settled stomachs, the St. John's wort that lifted dark moods. Adrian listened with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. He asked thoughtful questions, remembered details from previous conversations, brought her books from his library about botanical science. Their evening meetings stretched longer. The silences became filled with conversation, real conversation, ranging from plants to politics to poetry. Clara found herself laughing again, something she'd forgotten how to do. Found herself looking forward to each day because the evening would bring Adrian. And slowly, terrifyingly, she began to realize the truth. She was falling in love with him. It was madness, impossible. A duke and a destitute widow? Society would be scandalized. His family would be outraged. And Adrian himself, he was being kind, that was all. Friendly to a lonely neighbor, nothing more. But her heart didn't care about logic. And worse, she was beginning to suspect his heart didn't either. She noticed the way his eyes followed her when she moved, the way his smile softened when she laughed, the way he'd started bringing 2 cups when he made tea over the fire, not just one, the way he said her name, Clara, like it meant something. It terrified her, because if this was real, if he felt even a fraction of what she felt, then they were standing on the edge of a precipice. One step forward and everything would change, their lives, their reputations, their futures. And one step back meant losing something precious before it had even fully formed. Clara stood at that edge, her heart pounding, and didn't know which way to fall. The storm came without warning on a December evening. Clara had set out for the lake as usual, wrapped in her heaviest cloak, the sky overcast but not yet threatening. But weather in this part of England was treacherous. She should have known better. She was halfway across the fields when the first drops fell. Within minutes, it had become a deluge. Rain hammered down in sheets, driven by wind that tore at her cloak and stung her eyes. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud she felt it in her bones. She should turn back, but the cottage was no closer than the lake now, and she could see through the rain the dark shape of the old boathouse on the far shore, the abandoned structure Adrian had pointed out during one of their walks. Clara ran, her boots slipping in the mud, her cloak soon soaked through. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the world in flashes of white. She reached the boathouse just as another crack of thunder shook the earth. The door was unlocked, the wood swollen and warped, but still functional. Clara pushed inside and collapsed against the wall, gasping, water streaming from her hair and clothes. The interior was small and musty, filled with the ghosts of old boats and fishing equipment. But it was dry. Mostly. Clara was trying to wring water from her cloak when she heard footsteps outside. The door burst open and Adrian stumbled in, equally drenched, his dark hair plastered to his skull. He saw her and stopped short. "Clara, thank God. I was afraid you'd been caught in the open." "I got here just in time," she said, her teeth starting to chatter. The adrenaline was fading, leaving cold in its wake. Adrian moved immediately, shrugging out of his own coat. "Here. You're shaking. So are you." "I'll manage. Take it." She wanted to argue, but the cold was bone deep now. She accepted the coat, draping it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled faintly of cedar and something else, something uniquely Adrian. He was looking around the boathouse, assessing. There should be, yes. He moved to a corner and pulled out an old oilcloth that had been covering some equipment. Beneath it were a few pieces of dry wood. "We can make a fire. Small one, just to take the edge off." They worked together in silence, Adrian arranging the wood in the old iron stove that sat against one wall, while Clara found kindling among the debris. He had flint in his pocket. Of course he did. And within minutes a small flame was guttering to life. The warmth was immediate and glorious. They both moved closer, holding their hands toward the heat. Outside the storm raged. Lightning continued to flash, illuminating the boathouse's single small window. Thunder rolled across the sky like artillery. The rain was so heavy it sounded like 1,000 fingers drumming on the roof. They were trapped here, together, alone. Clara's heart was racing again, but not from the cold. "This is improper," she said quietly. Adrian looked at her. In the firelight, his eyes were very dark. "Yes. If anyone knew, they would condemn us both, you especially." The honesty was bracing. No pretense, no comfortable lies. "We should stay on opposite sides of the room," Clara said. "Yes, we should." Neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the storm outside had found its way into this small space and was crackling in the inches that separated them. "Clara," Adrian said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." "Don't." She closed her eyes. "Please don't." "Why not?" "Because once it's said, we can't take it back, and everything will change." "Everything has already changed." He moved closer, just half a step, but it felt monumental. "It changed the first evening I saw you at the lake. It changed every time you smiled at me, every time you trusted me with your thoughts, your knowledge, your time." Clara's breath hitched. "Adrian, I'm falling in love with you." The words were quiet, but absolute. "I think I've been falling since that first night. And I know all the reasons why this is impossible. I know what society would say, what my family would say. I know that I could ruin you just by standing too close." He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice shook slightly. "But I also know that I've never felt this way before. Never wanted to know someone the way I want to know you. Never felt truly seen until you looked at me." Tears were burning Clara's eyes. "This is madness." "I know. We have no future. We could. How?" The word came out as almost a sob. "You're a duke. I'm nobody. Less than nobody. A discarded widow living on charity. If you were seen with me, the scandal would destroy us both." Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm despite the cold. "Then let it destroy us," he whispered. "Because living without this, without you, feels like a worse destruction." And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, but when Clara's hands came up to grip his shirt, when she rose on her toes to meet him more fully, the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate. All the loneliness, all the longing, all the impossible hope they'd both been carrying poured into that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you, and it terrifies me." Adrian pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then we'll be terrified together." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the storm raged outside. And Clara, for the first time in her entire life, felt like she'd come home. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and glittering with frost. Clara woke in the boathouse, wrapped in Adrian's coat, his arm around her shoulders. Both of them huddled near the dying embers of the fire. For one perfect moment before full consciousness returned, she felt only warmth and safety. Then reality crashed down like a collapsing wall. She sat up abruptly, her heart hammering. Gray dawn light filtered through the grimy window. Outside, everything was still and silent, too silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what consequences would follow the night's transgression. "Adrian?" She shook his shoulder. "Adrian, wake up." He stirred, blinking awake, and for a moment his face was unguarded, soft with sleep, and something that looked like happiness. Then he too remembered where they were, what they'd done, and his expression shifted to alarm. "What time is it?" "Dawn, maybe just after." Clara was already standing, smoothing her hopelessly wrinkled dress, trying to finger-comb her hair into something less wild. "We have to leave, separately. If anyone sees us together, I know." Adrian was on his feet, running a hand through his own disheveled hair. He looked at her, and his eyes were full of everything they couldn't say. "Clara!" "Don't, not now. We have to think." She pressed her palms to her temples, forcing herself to be rational when every instinct screamed to run back into his arms. "You go first. Take the path through the woods toward Thornbridge. I'll wait 20 minutes, then go back to the cottage across the fields." "When will I see you again?" The question made her chest ache. "I don't know. We need to be careful. If there's even a whisper of scandal, I don't care about scandal." "You should." The words came out sharper than she intended. "You have responsibilities. A name. A position. I won't be the reason you lose everything." Adrian crossed the space between them in 2 strides and caught her hands. "You wouldn't be. You'd be the reason I finally have something worth keeping." Clara wanted to believe him, Wanted it so badly she could taste it, but she'd spent too many years learning that wanting didn't make things true. "Go," she whispered. "Please, before someone comes." He hesitated, then lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, first one, then the other. The gesture was so tender it nearly broke her. "This isn't over," he said. Then he was gone, slipping out the door and disappearing into the morning mist. Clara sank back against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. What had she done? What had they done? She gave him the promised 20 minutes, counting each second, before she too ventured out into the cold morning. The walk back to the cottage felt endless. Every rustle in the underbrush made her jump. Every distant sound could be someone who'd seen them, someone who'd know. But she reached the cottage without incident, let herself inside, and collapsed into a chair. Her hands were shaking. She'd spent the night alone with a man, an unmarried man, a duke. They'd kissed, they'd held each other. They'd confessed feelings that society said they had no right to feel. And the worst part, the absolutely terrifying part, was that she didn't regret it. She should. Any sensible woman would. But all Clara felt was the ghost of Adrian's arms around her and the memory of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. The knock on her door 3 hours later shattered that fragile peace. Clara had been trying to distract herself with mundane tasks, sweeping floors that didn't need sweeping, reorganizing her meager pantry. When the sharp rap sounded, her first thought was a rational hope. Adrian. He'd come back. But when she opened the door, it was Cornelius Whitmore who stood on her threshold, his face red and his eyes cold with fury. "May I come in?" Wasn't really a question. Clara's mouth went dry. "Of course." She stepped back, every muscle tense. Cornelius entered, looking around the cottage with barely concealed contempt. His gaze lingered on the simple furniture, the bare walls, the poverty of it all. When he finally looked at her, his expression made her skin crawl. "I've heard something disturbing," he said without preamble. "A rumor about you and the Duke of Thornbridge." The floor seemed to drop out from under Clara's feet. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't play coy with me." Cornelius moved closer, and she caught the smell of brandy on his breath. "One of the groundskeepers saw you walking toward the lake last evening, alone. The same groundskeeper saw the Duke riding in that direction, and this morning he saw you both emerging from the old boathouse, separately but suspiciously close together in time." "Oh God. Oh God." "The storm." Clara's voice came out thin and weak. "I took shelter." "So did he. That's all." "That's all?" Cornelius's laugh was ugly. "You expect me to believe that? That a widow of questionable virtue and a wealthy duke just happened to spend the night together innocently?" It was innocent. Was it? He was very close now, close enough that she could see the broken blood vessels in his cheeks, smell the spirits. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to trap yourself another husband, a wealthier one this time. Very calculating, Clara. I wouldn't have thought you had it in you." Rage flared hot in her chest. "How dare you? How dare I?" Cornelius's voice rose. "You're living on my charity, in a cottage that belongs to the Whitmore estate. You have no reputation left to defend, no position, nothing. And yet you have the audacity to carry on with a duke? I'm not carrying on with anyone. Then you're a fool as well as a whore." The word hit like a slap. "Because if you had the sense to actually trap him, you might have secured yourself a future. As it is, you've just destroyed the little you had left." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "Get out." "Oh, I'll leave. But understand this. I could evict you from this cottage tomorrow. Turn you out with nothing. The widow's portion isn't a legal requirement when there's moral turpitude involved. Moral turpitude? You spent the night with a man who isn't your husband. That's all the reason I need." Cornelius smiled, and it was a horrible expression. "But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to overlook this indiscretion. On one condition." Clara's stomach turned. "What condition?" "You end whatever this is with the Duke. Immediately. Completely. You don't go to the lake. You don't speak to him. If he calls here, you turn him away. You become invisible, as a woman in your position should be." The words were a cage closing around her. And if I refuse, then you'll be on the street by week's end, and I'll make sure every household in the county knows exactly why." His eyes glittered with malice. "You think society's cruel to poor widows now? Wait until you're a poor widow with a reputation for seducing dukes. You'll find charity rather scarce." He was right. Clara knew he was right. She had no power here, no leverage, no defense. If she defied him, she'd lose everything. But if she obeyed, she'd lose Adrian. "I need time to think," she heard herself say. "You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I make my decision for you." Cornelius adjusted his coat, suddenly all cold formality again. "Choose wisely, Clara. It's the only choice you have left." He left without another word, the door slamming behind him. Clara stood frozen in the center of her cottage, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't, but it was. She had until tomorrow evening to decide whether to fight for the first real happiness she'd ever known, or to surrender and fade into the obscurity society had always intended for her. The choice should have been simple: self-preservation, survival. She'd been alone before. She could be alone again. But the thought of never seeing Adrian again, never hearing his voice or feeling his arms around her, that felt like dying. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she paced the cottage's small confines, her mind turning over every possibility, every option. By dawn, she'd made her decision. It was reckless, possibly insane. But it was hers. If society was going to condemn her anyway, she might as well give them something worth condemning. Clara waited until mid-morning, then dressed in her least shabby gown and set out not toward the lake, but toward Thornbridge itself. She'd never been to the ducal estate. From a distance, she'd seen its towers rising above the trees, imposing, elegant, everything that spoke of power and permanence. Up close, it was even more overwhelming. The main house was a masterpiece of classical architecture, all perfect proportions and gleaming windows. The grounds were immaculate. Even the gravel drive seemed arranged with precision. Clara walked up to the front entrance feeling like an imposter. The footman who answered her knock looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "I need to speak with the Duke," she said, lifting her chin. "It's urgent." "The Duke is not receiving visitors." The footman's tone suggested he was barely restraining himself from adding, "especially not women like you." "Tell him Clara Whitmore is here. He'll see me." "I'm afraid—" "Tell him." She put every ounce of determination into her voice. "Now." The footman's expression soured, but he stepped back. "Wait here." He left her standing in the grand entrance hall, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Clara had never felt more out of place. She could practically hear the house judging her. Minutes stretched. She was beginning to think Adrian would refuse to see her when she heard rapid footsteps. He appeared at the top of the main staircase, his face a mixture of shock and concern. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "I need to speak with you, privately." Adrian glanced at the footman, who was hovering with obvious interest. "My study. Come." He led her through a maze of corridors to a room lined with books, dominated by a massive desk. The moment the door closed behind them, Adrian turned to her. "What's happened? Are you all right?" "No, I'm not." Clara took a breath, steadying herself. "Cornelius knows." "About us?" "About the boathouse." Adrian's face went pale. "How?" "A groundskeeper saw us, both going to the lake, both leaving the boathouse this morning." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Cornelius came to the cottage. He threatened to evict me unless I agree to never see you again." "That bastard!" Adrian's hands clenched. "He can't. He can. The widow's portion isn't legally protected if there's moral impropriety involved. And spending the night alone with you, that's all the impropriety he needs." Adrian crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "Then you'll come here. I'll protect you." "As what? Your mistress?" The word tasted bitter. "That would only prove everything they're saying about me." "Then as my wife." The world stopped. Clara stared at him, unable to process what she'd just heard. "What?" "Marry me." Adrian's voice was steady, his eyes fierce. "Today, if possible. Tomorrow, at the latest. Make this official before Cornelius or anyone else can use it against you." "Adrian, you can't. We barely know each other." "I know enough. He cupped her face in his hands. I know that you're brilliant and brave and stronger than anyone gives you credit for. I know that when I'm with you, I feel like the man I was always meant to be. I know that I love you, Clara, completely, and I don't give a damn what society thinks about it. Tears were burning Clara's eyes. Your family will disown you. Let them. Society will crucify us both. We'll survive it. You're a duke. You could have anyone, any titled lady, any fortune. I don't want anyone else. One. His thumbs brushed away the tears spilling down her cheeks. I want you, only you, the woman who taught herself botany because she had nothing else. The woman who sits by a lake just to feel peaceful. The woman who looks at me and sees Adrian, not a title. That's who I want to spend my life with. Clara's heart was breaking and mending at the same time. This is madness. Then let's be mad together. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me, Clara, please. Let me prove that love is worth more than propriety. She thought about Cornelius's threats, about the cottage that had never been a home, about 5 years of marriage where she'd been invisible. And then she thought about Adrian's arms around her in the boathouse, about being seen, about mattering, about choosing herself for once in her life. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Adrian's kiss was fierce and joyful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, in a way that transformed his entire face. We'll need a license. I'll send for the bishop today. He owes me a favor. We can be married by special license within 48 hours. Cornelius gave me until tomorrow evening. Then we'll do it tomorrow morning. Adrian was already moving toward his desk, pulling out paper and ink. I'll handle everything. You just stay here. Don't go back to the cottage. I have to. My things, I'll send servants to collect them. Clara, you're not setting foot on Whitmore land again. I won't risk Cornelius trying something. She wanted to argue, but the determination in his voice stopped her. He was protecting her. Actually protecting her, not just offering empty words. It was a strange, heady feeling. What about your family? She asked quietly. Shouldn't you at least tell them? Adrian's hand stilled on the paper. My mother died 3 years ago. My father is not in his right mind. Early senility. He's cared for by nurses and doesn't even recognize me most days. I have a younger sister, Catherine, but she married a merchant and moved to India. There's no one whose permission I need. No one who'll object? Oh, they'll object. His smile was grim. The extended family, the hangers-on, everyone who thinks they have a say in ducal business. Let them. By the time they hear about it, we'll already be married. He started writing with quick, decisive strokes. Clara watched him, this powerful man upending his life for her, and felt dizzy with the enormity of it. What if you regret this? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Adrian looked up. I won't. You don't know that. Once the scandal dies down, once reality sets in. Clara. He set down the pen and came around the desk. Listen to me. I've lived my entire life doing what was expected, following rules I never agreed to, maintaining appearances for people who never cared about my happiness. My brother was the same way. He died miserable, trapped in a marriage arranged for political advantage, never having known a single day of genuine joy. His voice roughened. I won't make the same mistake. I won't sacrifice the one real thing I've ever found because society disapproves. If that makes me selfish, so be it. Clara's throat was tight. It's not selfish, it's brave. Then we're brave together. A knock on the door interrupted them. Adrian called entrance, and the same footman from earlier appeared, his expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, Lord Pemberton is here. He says it's urgent. Pemberton. The solicitor from Ravenshire Park. Clara's stomach dropped. Adrian's jaw tightened. Show him in. Pemberton entered moments later, looking harried and uncomfortable. His eyes flicked to Clara, then quickly away. Your Grace, Mrs. Whitmore. He cleared his throat. I apologize for the intrusion, but I felt it necessary to come in person. Mr. Cornelius Whitmore has instructed me to inform you both that he intends to bring suit. Suit? Adrian's voice was dangerously soft. What kind of suit? Against Mrs. Whitmore, for moral breach of the widow's agreement, and against you, Your Grace, for For alienation of affection. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Alienation of affection? That's for married people. Mr. Whitmore is claiming that you seduced the Duke while still in mourning for your late husband, showing disrespect to the Whitmore name and violating the terms of your support. That's absurd, Clara's voice shook. I was never unfaithful during my marriage. Thomas died months ago. The mourning period is traditionally a year, Pemberton said miserably, and the terms of the widow's portion do include a clause about maintaining respectability. Mr. Whitmore believes he has grounds. He's lying, Adrian's voice cut like a blade. This is retaliation, harassment. Perhaps, but it will still require a court response. And the publicity, Pemberton hesitated. Forgive me, but the publicity will be considerable. If this goes to trial, every sordid detail will be in the papers. Mrs. Whitmore's reputation will be destroyed. It already is, apparently. Clara heard herself say the words from a great distance. If he's already claiming I'm a seductress. There's more. Pemberton pulled out a document. Mr. Whitmore is also petitioning to have you removed from the cottage immediately, pending the suit's resolution. He's claiming you're a danger to the estate's moral character. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so horrifying. Clara, a danger to anyone's morals. When? Adrian demanded. He's asked for an emergency order. Given the circumstances, he may get it. You could be evicted as soon as tomorrow. Tomorrow. The same deadline Cornelius had given her. He'd planned this, all of it. Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. He wants me to grovel, to beg him to withdraw the suit in exchange for me disappearing from your life. He won't get the chance. Adrian turned to Pemberton. Thank you for the warning. You can tell Mr. Whitmore that Mrs. Whitmore will not be at the cottage to evict. She'll be here, at Thornbridge. Pemberton's eyes widened. Your Grace, I must advise, I don't need your advice. I need you to witness. Adrian grabbed Clara's hand. As of this moment, Mrs. Whitmore is under my protection, and tomorrow morning she will become the Duchess of Thornbridge. I'd suggest Mr. Whitmore withdraw his suit before he finds himself in a legal battle with a peer of the realm. You're marrying her? Pemberton looked like he might faint. Tomorrow morning, by special license, which I'm going to obtain right now. Adrian squeezed Clara's hand. I'll be back within 2 hours. Pemberton, you'll stay and document that Mrs. Whitmore has taken residence here of her own free will, with proper chaperonage to escape harassment from Mr. Whitmore. That should protect us from any accusations of impropriety. He was already moving toward the door. Clara called after him. Adrian, trust me. He looked back, his eyes blazing. I won't let him destroy you. I promise. Then he was gone, and Clara was left standing in a Duke's study with a shocked solicitor, her whole world spinning out of control. The next 12 hours passed in a blur. True to his word, Adrian returned with the special license, along with a bishop who looked both disapproving and intimidated. Arrangements were made with swift efficiency. The wedding would take place at dawn in Thornbridge's private chapel. Adrian's housekeeper, a stern but not unkind woman named Mrs. Ross, was enlisted as chaperone and witness. Clara was given a suite of rooms in the guest wing, lavish beyond anything she'd ever experienced. A maid appeared with clothes that had belonged to Adrian's late mother, altering them to fit Clara's smaller frame. Another servant brought dinner on fine china that probably cost more than everything Clara had owned in her life. It should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if she could fly or if she'd simply fall. Mrs. Ross brought her tea that evening, settling into a chair by the fire with the air of a woman preparing for battle. You understand what you're walking into? She asked bluntly. Clara looked up from the cup she'd been staring at. I think so. Do you? Because marrying a duke isn't like marrying a regular man. There'll be expectations, duties. Every eye in England will be on you, watching for you to fail. I know. They'll say terrible things, that you trapped him, that you're a fortune hunter, or worse. They'll dig up every detail of your past and twist it into something ugly. I know, Clara said again, more firmly. Mrs. Ross studied her. Then why are you doing this? It was a fair question. Clara set down her tea, gathering her thoughts. Because for 5 years, I was married to a man who saw me as an obligation. I lived in a house that was never a home. I made myself small and quiet and obedient, and it didn't matter. I was still invisible. She met the housekeeper's eyes. Adrian sees me, really sees me. When I'm with him, I feel like I matter, like my thoughts and feelings and dreams have value. And maybe that makes me selfish, but I can't go back to being invisible. Not now that I know what it feels like to be seen. A long silence. Then Mrs. Ross nodded slowly. Fair enough, but you should know. His Grace has never defied propriety like this. Never put his own desires before duty. You've changed him. Is that bad? I don't know yet. The older woman stood. But I'll tell you this. He's been lonely since he inherited the title. Lost. If you can make him happy, truly happy, then the rest be damned. I'll stand with you. It wasn't quite approval, but it was close enough. Clara felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Thank you, Mrs. Ross nodded briskly. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult enough without you being exhausted. But rest was impossible. Clara lay in the luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What was she doing? Marrying a man she'd known for mere weeks? Letting him risk everything for her? And yet, what was the alternative? Return to the cottage and let Cornelius destroy her? Fade into poverty and obscurity? Or worse, live the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she'd been brave enough to choose love? No, she'd made her choice. Tomorrow she would stand in that chapel and bind her life to Adrian's. And whatever came after, scandal, ostracism, hardship, they would face it together. The thought was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. Dawn came cold and gray. Clara dressed in a gown of deep blue silk that had been altered to fit her, simple, elegant, and completely unlike the drab morning clothes she'd worn for months. The maid arranged her hair, weaving small white flowers through the dark strands. When Clara looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This woman looked regal, strong, ready. Mrs. Ross escorted her down to the chapel, a small stone building on the estate's grounds. Inside, candlelight flickered against old wood and stained glass. The bishop stood at the altar, looking resigned to his role in this scandal. Adrian was already there, dressed in dark formal wear, his face serious. When he saw Clara, his expression transformed. The worry, the tension, all of it fell away, leaving only joy. She walked down the short aisle alone. No father to give her away, no family to witness. Just her, making this choice for herself. Adrian took her hand when she reached him, and his grip was steady. The bishop began the ceremony. The words were traditional, familiar, but they felt weighted with enormous significance. When it came time for vows, Adrian spoke clearly, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. I, Adrian Edmund Vale, take thee, Clara Whitmore, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, protect you, and stand with you against all who would do you harm. I promise to see you always, in joy and in sorrow, in wealth and in poverty, in health and in sickness, until death parts us. Clara's voice shook only slightly when she spoke her own vows. I, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore, take thee, Adrian Edmund Vale, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand with you, support you, and face whatever comes with courage and love. I promise to be your partner, your equal, and your truest friend until death parts us. The ring Adrian slipped onto her finger was warm from his pocket, heavy, real. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the bishop intoned. May heaven have mercy on you both. It wasn't quite the traditional blessing, but Clara supposed it would have to do. Adrian kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and fragile. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. Duchess of Thornbridge, Adrian murmured. How does it feel? Terrifying, Clara admitted. Good. We'll be terrified together. They signed the register. Mrs. Ross and the bishop witnessed, and just like that, Clara Whitmore, invisible widow, discarded burden, became Clara Vale, Duchess of Thornbridge. They walked out of the chapel into the morning light, hand in hand. The world was going to lose its mind when it found out. But for this one perfect moment, Clara didn't care. She'd made her choice. She'd fought for her own happiness. And whatever consequences followed, she would face them standing beside the man who'd given her the courage to believe she was worth fighting for. The scandal exploded across London society within 48 hours. Clara had known it would be bad. She'd braced herself for gossip, for sneers, for the cutting remarks of aristocratic women who'd never accepted her, even when she'd been merely unremarkable. But nothing had prepared her for the sheer viciousness of the response. The Times ran the announcement on its society page. His Grace the Duke of Thornbridge has married Mrs. Clara Whitmore, widow of Thomas Whitmore of Ravenshire Park, by special license. The brevity of it was damning. No mention of family approval, no guest list, nothing but the stark facts that screamed impropriety. By afternoon, the drawing rooms of Mayfair were buzzing with speculation. By evening, the first poison pen letters arrived at Thornbridge. Adrian burned them without reading more than a line or two, but not before Clara glimpsed the words. Harlot. Fortune hunter. Scheming Jezebel who'd probably killed her first husband to free herself for richer prey. Don't read them, Adrian said, feeding another letter to the fire in his study. They're not worth the paper they're written on. They're what people believe. Clara stood at the window, looking out at the winter landscape. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the grounds in white that looked deceptively peaceful. They think I trapped you. Then they're fools. Are they? She turned to face him. Adrian, be honest. If our positions were reversed, if you'd heard about a penniless widow marrying a duke by special license mere weeks after they'd met, what would you think? Adrian's jaw tightened. I'd think it was none of my concern. You'd think exactly what they're thinking, that she was calculating, that she saw an opportunity and seized it. Clara, I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying I understand why they believe it. She wrapped her arms around herself. And I don't know how to fight something that sounds so plausible. Before Adrian could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Ross entered, her face grim. Your Grace! Your Grace! She nodded to each of them. There are visitors, Lord and Lady Ashworth, Lord Pemberton, and... She hesitated. Several members of the peerage. They're requesting an immediate audience. Adrian's expression darkened. Tell them, they say they won't leave until they've spoken with you. They're quite insistent. Clara's stomach dropped. This was it. The formal condemnation. The moment when Adrian's world closed ranks against the interloper who dared to breach their walls. Show them to the drawing room, Adrian said. We'll see them together. Adrian, maybe I should... Together. His voice was firm. You're my wife, my duchess. You stand beside me, not behind me. They walked to the drawing room side by side, but Clara felt like she was marching to an execution. The assembled group turned as they entered, 6 of England's most powerful nobles, their faces ranging from disapproving to openly hostile. Lord Ashworth, a silver-haired man in his 60s, stepped forward. Thornbridge, we need to speak with you, privately. Anything you need to say can be said in front of my wife. This concerns your wife rather intimately. Then she especially should hear it. Adrian's tone could have cut glass. Ashworth's mouth thinned. Very well, we'll be blunt. This marriage is a disaster. The talk in London is vicious. You've made yourself, and by extension all of us, a laughingstock. I've married the woman I love. If that makes me a laughingstock, so be it. Love. Lady Ashworth spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with disdain. She was a formidable woman, tall and severe, with eyes that could freeze water. How romantically naive. Your Grace, you are a duke. You have responsibilities that transcend personal feeling. Your choice of bride reflects on every peer in this realm. Then perhaps those peers should examine their own marriages before judging mine, Adrian said coldly. This isn't about judgment, another man said. Lord Whitley, Clara remembered, a friend of the late king. It's about practical reality. Your wife has no dowry, no connections, no training in how to manage a ducal household. She's common-born, uneducated in the ways of society. She's standing right here, Clara heard herself say. Perhaps you could direct your insults to my face rather than speaking as if I'm furniture. Shocked silence. Lady Ashworth's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. Well, she said. At least she has spirit. Misplaced and inappropriate, but spirit nonetheless. Clara felt rage kindle in her chest. These people, these smug, self-satisfied aristocrats who'd never wanted for anything in their lives, had the audacity to judge her? To decide she wasn't worthy based on nothing but the circumstances of her birth? "You're right," she said, stepping forward. "I have no dowry, no noble bloodline, no training in how to arrange seating charts or select the correct fork. What I do have is a mind, a will, and the love of a good man. If that's insufficient for your exalted standards, I suggest you leave my house." "Your house?" Lord Whitley's voice was sharp. "This is Thornbridge. It belongs to my husband, who is also my husband, which makes it our house, and your guests here only as long as we choose to tolerate your presence." Adrian was staring at her with something that looked like awe. Lord Ashworth's face had gone purple. "See here, young woman. No, you see here." Clara was done being quiet, done being invisible. "You've come here to bully my husband into annulling our marriage, to shame me into disappearing. It won't work. I'm not leaving. I'm not apologizing for having the audacity to marry above my station. And I'm certainly not cowering before a group of people whose only accomplishment is being born to the right parents. How dare you? How dare I speak the truth? Someone should. You sit in your grand houses, inheriting wealth and position you did nothing to earn, and you have the arrogance to decide who deserves happiness and who doesn't. Well, I'm sorry to shatter your illusions, but titles don't make you superior. They just make you lucky." The room had gone deadly silent. Then Lady Ashworth laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking crystal. "Well," she said, "she certainly has courage. Foolish courage, but courage." She looked at Adrian. "You've made your bed, Thornbridge. I hope you're prepared to lie in it, because after this display there's not a drawing room in London that will receive her." "Then we won't go to London," Adrian said quietly. More shocked silence. "You can't be serious," Pemberton said. "Your Grace, you have duties. Parliamentary sessions, social obligations, which I can fulfill or not as I choose. I'm a peer of the realm, not a performing monkey." Adrian moved to stand beside Clara, taking her hand. "My wife is right. We don't answer to you, any of you. And if the price of marrying the woman I love is social exile, I'll pay it gladly." Lord Ashworth shook his head slowly. "You're making a grave mistake." "That's my prerogative. The Queen herself will hear of this. Then tell her I send my regards." One by one, the nobles filed out, their expressions ranging from outrage to pity. Only Lady Ashworth paused at the door, looking back at Clara. "You've won this round, girl. But don't mistake a battle for a war. They'll destroy you eventually. They always do." Then she was gone, and Clara and Adrian were alone in the echoing silence of the drawing room. Clara's legs suddenly felt weak. She sank onto a nearby settee, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. "I can't believe I just did that," she whispered. Adrian sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "You were magnificent." "I was reckless." "Adrian, I just insulted half the peerage. They'll never forgive us." "I don't want their forgiveness." He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "Clara, do you know what I saw just now? I saw a woman who refused to be diminished, who stood her ground against people who've spent their entire lives making others feel small. You were everything I knew you could be. Even if it costs you everything. You're not a cost. You're the point." Clara wanted to believe him, but as the afternoon shadows lengthened, reality settled over her like a heavy cloak. They'd crossed a line, burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. Adrian had chosen her over his entire social world. The question was, what would that world do in response? Well, the answer came 3 days later. Clara had been working in the estate's still room, a space Mrs. Ross had grudgingly allowed her to use for her plant studies. She was cataloging dried herbs when Adrian burst in, a letter crumpled in his fist. "What's wrong?" "Cornelius." Adrian's voice was tight with fury. "He's filed a formal complaint with the House of Lords, claims I used my position to seduce you while you were still legally bound by mourning obligations. He's demanding the marriage be annulled and that I be censured for ungentlemanly conduct." Clara's hand stilled on the herbs. "Can he do that?" "He's done it. Whether it will succeed..." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "The Lords have agreed to hear the complaint. I'm summoned to London next week." "Then we'll go together." "No." Adrian's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. If you appear before the lords, they'll tear you apart. The questions they'll ask, the insinuations they'll make. Clara, I won't subject you to that. But if you go alone, then I'll defend us both. But I need you safe. Here. He gripped her shoulders. Promise me you'll stay at Thornbridge, no matter what you hear, no matter what they say about us. Promise. Clara wanted to argue, but the fear in his eyes stopped her. I promise. He kissed her fiercely, desperately, as if trying to memorize the feel of her. Then he was gone, preparing for a journey to London that would determine their entire future. He left the next morning. Clara watched his carriage disappear down the drive, her heart heavy with foreboding. Mrs. Ross found her still standing at the window an hour later. He'll prevail, the housekeeper said. His Grace is no fool. He'll make them see reason. Will he? Or will they close ranks to protect one of their own? Clara turned away from the window. Cornelius is a landowner, common-born, yes, but respectable. I'm the scandalous widow. Who do you think they'll believe? Mrs. Ross had no answer to that. The days crawled past. Clara threw herself into work, cataloging the estate, helping in the kitchens, anything to keep her mind occupied. But at night, alone in the vast ducal bedchamber she now shared with Adrian, fear crept in. What if the Lord sided with Cornelius? What if they annulled the marriage? Would Adrian fight for her, or would he eventually accept that marrying her had been a mistake? The letter arrived on the 5th day. It wasn't from Adrian. It was from a London solicitor named Graves, and its contents made Clara's blood run cold. Mrs. Whitmore, it began. Not Your Grace, Clara noted with a sinking feeling. I write to inform you of developments in the matter of Whitmore versus Thornbridge. During testimony before the Lords, evidence has emerged that casts your character in a deeply troubling light. Specifically, witnesses have come forward claiming that you engaged in an inappropriate relationship with His Grace while your late husband was still living. If substantiated, such claims would constitute adultery, grounds not only for annulment but for criminal prosecution. I strongly advise you to retain legal counsel immediately. The paper slipped from Clara's numb fingers. Adultery. They were accusing her of adultery. It was a lie, a vicious, calculated lie. She'd never even met Adrian until months after Thomas's death. But if witnesses had come forward, if people were willing to swear to it, her reputation would be destroyed, and Adrian, tied to an adulteress, would be ruined alongside her. Clara's mind raced. She needed to get to London, needed to defend herself, to expose the lies. But she'd promised Adrian she'd stay here. A knock on the door made her jump. Mrs. Ross entered, her face grave. There are men here. They say they're from Ravenshire Park. They have a writ. They're demanding entry to search for evidence. Evidence of what? Love letters, they claim, between you and His Grace, dated before your husband's death. It was insane. There were no letters. There couldn't be. But if these men planted evidence, if they discovered forged correspondence, don't let them in, Clara said. This is Thornbridge. They have no authority here. They have a magistrate with them. He says the writ is valid. Clara felt the walls closing in. This was orchestrated, planned. Cornelius hadn't just filed a complaint. He'd built an entire case designed to destroy her, and Adrian wasn't here to fight it. She made a decision in that instant, reckless, perhaps, but staying here meant being trapped while her enemies manufactured evidence. If she was going to be condemned, it would be for what she'd actually done, not for lies. Stall them, she told Mrs. Ross. I need 10 minutes. Your Grace, what are you Please, just 10 minutes. Mrs. Ross's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. 10 minutes, no more. Clara ran to her room, changed into riding clothes, and stuffed a few essentials into a bag. She scrawled a quick note to Adrian. Forgive me. I couldn't let them destroy you with lies. I'm going to London to face this myself. And left it on the bed. Then she slipped down the servants' stairs and out through the kitchen to the stables. The head groom tried to stop her. Your Grace, His Grace said you weren't to go anywhere. His Grace also said, I'm the Duchess of Thornbridge, which means I give orders too. Saddle me a horse, now. The authority in her voice must have convinced him. Minutes later, Clara was galloping down the drive on a swift mare, the winter wind cutting through her cloak. Behind her, she heard shouts. The men from Ravenshire, realizing she was escaping. But she had a head start, and she knew these lands. She cut through the fields, across frozen streams, into the woods where carriages couldn't follow. London was 2 days' hard ride. She had no money beyond a few coins, no plan beyond getting there and confronting her accusers. But she was done hiding, done letting others control her fate. If they wanted to destroy her, they'd have to do it to her face. The journey was brutal. Clara had never ridden so far or so fast in her life. She stopped only when the horse needed rest, sleeping in hedgerows and begging food from suspicious farm wives. By the time London's spires came into view on the second evening, she was exhausted, frozen, and filthy. But she was there. Finding the House of Lords proved easier than she'd expected. Everyone knew where the peerage met. Getting inside was harder. The guards at the entrance took one look at her bedraggled appearance and moved to block her path. No entry without authorization. "I'm the Duchess of Thornbridge. My husband is being heard before the Lords today." The guard's expression was skeptical. The Duchess of Thornbridge, dressed like a beggar and arriving on horseback? The Duchess of Thornbridge, who rode 2 days straight from her estate because her enemies are spreading lies about her. Clara drew herself up to her full height. "Now let me pass or I'll have your position." Something in her tone, or perhaps the sheer audacity of her claim, made the guard hesitate. He conferred with his colleague, then grudgingly stepped aside. "Second floor, the chamber is in session. You'll have to wait until there's a recess." Clara didn't wait. She pushed through the heavy doors, up the marble stairs, following the sound of voices, until she found the chamber where the lords assembled. The scene was more intimidating than she'd imagined. Rows of benches filled with men in formal dress. At the front, a raised platform where Adrian stood, his face pale and strained. Opposite him, Cornelius Whitmore, looking smug and satisfied. And speaking, giving testimony, was a woman Clara had never seen before. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with the calculating look of someone who'd been paid well for her performance. "Saw them together numerous times," the woman was saying. "Mrs. Whitmore and the Duke, meeting in secret while poor Mr. Thomas Whitmore still lived. I'm a seamstress, you see, and I worked at Ravenshire Park. I saw her leaving the house at odd hours, returning disheveled, and once I saw her in the Duke's carriage." Lies. All lies. Clara didn't think. She simply pushed open the chamber door and walked in. Every head turned. The testimony stopped mid-sentence. "Clara!" Adrian's voice was hoarse with shock. "What are you doing here?" She ignored him, walking straight down the center aisle until she stood before the assembled lords. "I'm here," she said clearly, "because I will not let my character be assassinated by paid liars while I cower in the countryside." Uproar. Voices rose in protest, in shock, in outrage. The lord presiding over the hearing, a stern man with heavy jowls, banged his gavel. "Order! This is highly irregular." "So is accusing an innocent woman of adultery based on fabricated evidence," Clara shot back. She pointed at the seamstress. "I've never seen this woman in my life. I never worked at Ravenshire Park. I lived there for 5 years, isolated and ignored. I certainly never met the Duke of Thornbridge during that time." "You would say that," Cornelius interjected smoothly. "An adulteress would hardly confess." Clara turned on him. "And a greedy, vindictive man would hardly admit he's inventing charges to punish me for refusing his advances." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Cornelius's face went red. "How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? You came to my cottage. You threatened me. You demanded I end my relationship with Adrian or you'd destroy me. When I refused, you manufactured this entire case." She looked at the assembled lords. "Ask yourselves, if I were truly guilty of adultery, why would Mr. Whitmore have allowed me to remain in the dower cottage for months after my husband's death? Why would he wait until after my marriage to the Duke to suddenly discover evidence of my infidelity?" Silence. She could see some of the lords exchanging glances. The presiding lord cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, Duchess of Thornbridge," Clara corrected. "I am legally married. Unless you plan to annul that marriage based on lies, I deserve to be addressed by my proper title." More murmuring. Adrian was staring at her with a mixture of terror and admiration. "Very well. Your Grace." The title sounded reluctant. "These are serious accusations on both sides. Mr. Whitmore, Do you have any evidence beyond witness testimony? Cornelius hesitated. The letters were never found, Clara interrupted, because they don't exist. I challenge Mr. Whitmore to produce a single letter, a single note, anything in my handwriting that proves his claims. He can't, because I never wrote to the Duke until after my husband's death. The witness is lying. For money, I assume. How much did you pay her, Cornelius? The seamstress's face had gone pale. One of the lords, an older man with shrewd eyes, leaned forward. Madam, are you being compensated for your testimony? That is, answer the question. Mr. Whitmore said he'd help my son find employment if I remembered seeing certain things. The chamber exploded. Voices rose in anger, in disgust. The presiding lord's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! I will have order! When silence finally fell, he looked at Cornelius with cold fury. You brought a paid witness before this body? You fabricated evidence? I did nothing of the sort. The woman's testimony is true. It's perjury, Clara said, and you know it. You've been trying to destroy me from the moment I refused to be your mistress. That's a lie. Is it? Shall we ask your servants, your solicitor? How many people know about your interest in young widows? Clara's voice was like a blade. You're not prosecuting adultery. You're prosecuting rejection. The presiding lord looked between them, his expression grim. This hearing is a disgrace. Mr. Whitmore, your complaint is dismissed. If you ever bring fabricated charges before this body again, you'll face prosecution yourself. As for you, Your Grace, he looked at Clara, you've shown remarkable courage. Foolish, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. Your marriage stands. Relief flooded through Clara so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Adrian was suddenly there, catching her, his arms strong and steady. You insane, brilliant woman, he whispered. You promised to stay at Thornbridge. I lied. Clara felt hysterical laughter bubbling up. I'm sorry. I couldn't let him destroy you. You could have been arrested, imprisoned. Clara, but I wasn't. We won. She pulled back to look at his face. We won, Adrian. He kissed her there, in front of the entire House of Lords, and Clara didn't care. Let them see. Let them know that love could win, even against impossible odds. But as they left the chamber, Clara caught Cornelius's expression. He wasn't defeated. He was enraged, and the look in his eyes promised that this wasn't over, not by a long way. They stayed in London only long enough to secure formal documentation of the hearing's outcome. Adrian wanted to leave immediately. The city felt dangerous now, full of eyes and whispers. But Clara insisted on one stop first, the offices of the Times. What are you doing? Adrian asked as their carriage pulled up outside the newspaper's building. Controlling the narrative. Clara stepped down onto the pavement. They've been writing about us. Now they'll write what I tell them to write. Inside, she demanded to speak with the editor. The man who appeared, a harried-looking fellow with ink-stained fingers, looked skeptical until Adrian stepped forward. My wife has a story for you, the Duke said quietly. I suggest you listen. What followed was the most audacious gamble of Clara's life. She told the editor everything, the Loveless first marriage, the isolation, Cornelius's harassment, the fabricated charges. She painted herself not as a schemer, but as a survivor, a woman who'd dared to choose happiness and been punished for it. Why should I print this? The editor asked. It's your word against Whitmore's. Because I can prove it. Clara pulled out the note Cornelius had sent her, the one demanding she end things with Adrian. This is in his handwriting. It proves he threatened me. And if you interview the seamstress who recanted today, she'll confirm she was paid to lie. The editor's eyes gleamed. This was a story, a real story. I'll need corroboration. You'll have it. Print this, and I'll give you exclusive access to Thornbridge. Interview the servants, the estate workers. Let them tell you what kind of man the Duke is, what kind of woman I am. It was a risk, opening their lives to scrutiny. But Clara was done hiding. The story ran 3 days later. The Duchess who fought back, how one woman defeated false accusations and won her happiness. It wasn't entirely sympathetic. The editor had included plenty of scandalous details to sell papers. But the overall tone was clear. Clara was a victim who'd become a victor. Public opinion began to shift. Not entirely. There were still those who condemned her, who saw her as an upstart who'd gotten above her station. But others, particularly women, began to see her differently. As someone who'd refused to accept the role society had assigned her, who'd fought for what she wanted and won. Letters began arriving at Thornbridge. Not all were kind, but many were. Women writing to say they admired her courage, that her story had inspired them. Clara read each one, her eyes often wet with tears. "You're becoming a symbol," Adrian said one evening, watching her sort through the correspondence. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live my life." Too late for that. But he was smiling. "You challenged the entire aristocratic order. People will remember." Clara looked at him, this man who'd risked everything for her. "Do you regret it, any of it?" "Not for a second." Adrian pulled her close. "Though I could have done without the terror of watching you face down the House of Lords. I couldn't let them destroy you with lies. And I couldn't let them destroy you at all." He kissed her forehead. "We're partners, Clara. In everything. That means facing danger together." She wanted to believe the danger was over, that they could finally live in peace. But that night, as she lay awake listening to the wind howl around Thornbridge's ancient walls, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle had only just begun. Because Cornelius Whitmore wasn't the type of man to accept defeat gracefully. And somewhere in the darkness, she knew he was planning his revenge. The revenge came disguised as illness. It started in the tenant village on the eastern edge of Thornbridge lands, a cluster of cottages where estate workers and their families lived. Mrs. Ross brought the news to Clara one gray February morning, her face pale. 3 children down with fever, high temperatures, terrible coughing. The village healer says she's never seen anything like it. Clara set down the botanical journal she'd been reading. "Have you sent for a doctor?" "The nearest physician is in Ashford, half a day's ride in this weather. By the time he arrives..." Mrs. Ross didn't finish the sentence. Clara was already moving toward the door. "Get me my cloak. I'm going to the village." "Your Grace, you can't. If it's contagious, then I'll be careful. But I'm not sitting in this house while children suffer." She paused. "Bring my plant kit, the one from the still room." Adrian found her in the entrance hall, pulling on boots. "Where are you going?" "The tenant village. There's sickness." "Then I'm coming with you." They rode together through the icy morning, the wind cutting through even their heavy cloaks. The village was a dismal sight, smoke rising from chimneys, doors closed tight against the cold. A woman directed them to the first afflicted cottage with a worried expression. Inside, the heat was stifling. A fire roared in the grate, and 3 small children lay on pallets near it, their faces flushed with fever. Their mother, a thin woman with work-roughened hands, looked up as Clara entered, her eyes widening. "Your Grace, you shouldn't be here." "Let me see them." Clara knelt beside the nearest child, a girl of perhaps 6. The child's breathing was labored, her chest rattling with each inhalation. Clara pressed a hand to her forehead and felt scorching heat. This was bad. Very bad. She examined each child quickly, noting symptoms. High fever, yes, but also the distinctive cough, the difficulty breathing, and there, on the girl's neck, swollen glands. Clara's medical knowledge was limited, gleaned from books and careful study rather than formal training, but she'd read enough to recognize the signs. "It's not plague," she said, and saw the mother's shoulders sag with relief. "But it's a severe respiratory infection. They need to be kept cool, not hot. Open the windows." "But the fever is the body trying to fight the infection. Adding more heat makes it worse." Clara was already moving, pushing open the shutters despite the mother's protests. Cold air flooded the room. "Trust me, and I need willow bark, if you have any. Yarrow too, and clean water, lots of it." "I don't have... We used the last of the willow for my husband's back pain." "Then I'll get it." Clara turned to Adrian. "Go back to Thornbridge. Bring my entire collection from the still room, every jar, every bottle, and send riders to every cottage in the village. I need to know how many are sick." Adrian hesitated. "Clara, if this spreads, it's already spreading. That's why we need to move fast." She met his eyes. "I can help these people, but I need supplies." He nodded and was gone. Clara spent the next hour moving between cottages, assessing the sick. By the time Adrian returned with carts full of her carefully prepared remedies, she'd counted 14 cases, 11 children and 3 adults, all showing the same symptoms. She set up a treatment station in the village's small communal hall, organizing her supplies with swift efficiency: willow bark tea for fever, thyme and eucalyptus steam for the breathing difficulties, elderberry syrup to support the body's defenses, comfrey compresses for the chest congestion. The village healer, an elderly woman named Meg, watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "You learned this from books?" she asked as Clara demonstrated how to prepare the steam treatment. "Books and experimentation. Willow bark has been used for fever since ancient times. The rest I've studied. Book learning's one thing, practical healing's another." "Then teach me the practical parts, and I'll share the book learning." Clara looked up. "We need each other right now. These children need everything we can give them." Something shifted in Meg's expression. She stepped forward. "Right then, let me show you how we do poultices in these parts. Your fancy preparation's good, but there's tricks to making it stick." They worked side by side through the afternoon and into the evening. Adrian helped too, carrying water, stoking fires, holding frightened children while Clara administered treatments. Slowly, gradually, the desperate edge of crisis began to ease. Fevers came down. Breathing grew easier. By nightfall, all 14 patients were resting more comfortably. Clara collapsed onto a bench in the hall, exhausted. Her dress was stained with medicine, her hair falling from its pins. Adrian sat beside her, looking equally worn. "You saved them," he said quietly. "We don't know that yet. The next few days will tell." "Clara, you rode into a sick village without hesitation. You knew exactly what to do. You saved them." She wanted to accept the praise, but fear still gnawed at her. "If I'm wrong, if the treatment doesn't work, it's working. I saw it. Those children are breathing again." Meg approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "We should stay through the night. Watch for complications." "I'll stay," Clara said. "You should rest." The old healer snorted. "I've been doing this 40 years, girl. I can manage one night. But you're the Duchess. You shouldn't be here at all." "Where else would I be?" Meg studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Where else indeed? All right then, we'll both stay. And His Grace too, by the look of him." They took shifts through the night, checking patients, administering treatments, soothing fevered children. Clara had never been so tired in her life. But when dawn broke and all 14 patients were still alive, still improving, the exhaustion felt like victory. Word spread through the estate with startling speed. The Duchess had saved the village children. The Duchess knew medicine. The Duchess had worked through the night alongside common folk, treating them as equals. Claire didn't realize the significance until 3 days later, when a delegation of tenant farmers appeared at Thornbridge's front door. Mrs. Ross showed them to the drawing room where Clara was reviewing her medical notes. There were 5 of them, weathered men and women who worked the land. They stood awkwardly, caps in hand, clearly uncomfortable in the grand house. "Your Grace," one of them said, a man named William, Clara remembered from the village. "We've come to thank you for what you did, for our children." "There's no need for thanks. I only did what anyone would do." "No." William's voice was firm. "That's not true. The previous Duke, begging your pardon, Your Grace," he nodded to Adrian, who'd joined them. "The previous Duke never set foot in the village, never asked after us, never cared if we lived or died as long as the rents came in. And the ladies of quality we've known, they wouldn't soil their hands with the likes of us." "But you did," a woman added. "You came when we needed you. You didn't turn away." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Your children were suffering. How could I turn away?" "Easily." William twisted his cap. "Most do, but you didn't. And we want you to know there's talk, bad talk about you and His Grace, about how you're not fit to be Duchess, how you trapped him, all manner of cruel things." Clara's chest tightened, even here, even after everything. "But we don't believe it," William continued. "We've seen what kind of woman you are, and anyone who says you're not worthy can answer to us." The other farmers nodded emphatically. Clara blinked against sudden tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know. After they left, Adrian pulled her into his arms. You're winning them over, the people who matter. The tenants aren't the ones who control society. No, but they're the ones who make this estate run, and they're loyal now, to you. He kissed her forehead. That's power, Clara, real power. Not the hollow kind that comes from titles and bloodlines, but the kind that's earned. She wanted to believe him, but the letters still came from London, poison pen missives from society matrons, formal notices of gatherings she wasn't invited to. The aristocracy hadn't forgotten or forgiven. Then, 2 weeks later, everything changed again. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, bearing the royal seal. Clara's hand shook as she opened it, certain it was some new disaster. But the contents made her read it 3 times to be sure she understood. Adrian. Her voice came out strangled. Adrian, come here. He appeared from his study, took one look at her face, and crossed to her side. What is it? It's from the Queen. She's requesting our presence at court. Adrian took the letter, his eyes scanning the formal script. Requesting or commanding? Does it matter? It might. He read more carefully. This is a private audience, not a public event. She wants to meet you. To condemn me, probably. To tell me I'm a disgrace. Or to decide for herself what kind of woman you are. Adrian set down the letter. The Queen is no fool, Clara. She doesn't blindly accept what society tells her. If she's calling us to court, it's because she wants to make her own judgment. What if her judgment is that I'm everything they say I am? Then we'll deal with it, together. Adrian took her hands. But Clara, this is an opportunity. If the Queen accepts you, society will have to follow. The audience was set for 10 days hence. Clara spent those days in a state of controlled panic, trying to prepare for a meeting that could determine her entire future. Mrs. Ross took charge of the practical matters, ordering new dresses, drilling Clara on court etiquette, teaching her the 100 small rituals that governed royal interactions. It was overwhelming and exhausting and terrifying. You must not speak unless spoken to, Mrs. Ross instructed. You must curtsy exactly so, not too deep, not too shallow. You must keep your eyes lowered unless she invites you to meet her gaze. You must— Mrs. Ross, Clara interrupted gently, I appreciate your help, but if I try to remember all of this, I'll tie myself in knots. The Queen wants to meet me, so I'll be myself. If that's not good enough, then no amount of practice curtsying will save me. The housekeeper looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Clara's expression stopped her. As you say, Your Grace, though I still think you should practice the curtsy. They traveled to London 3 days before the audience, staying at Thornbridge's townhouse in Mayfair. Clara had never been there. It was grand and cold and felt nothing like home. But it was close to the palace, which was what mattered. The night before the audience, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her bedroom, looking out at the dark city, trying to calm her racing heart. Adrian found her there, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. You'll freeze. I can't stop thinking about tomorrow. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I offend her? What if you're exactly who you are, and that's enough? Adrian turned her to face him. Clara, you've faced down the House of Lords. You've saved children's lives. You've survived poverty, abuse, scandal. You're the strongest person I know. Don't doubt yourself now. I'm terrified. Good. That means you understand what's at stake. But don't let fear make you small. The woman who stood in the House of Lords and called out corruption, that's who the Queen needs to see. Clara leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. Stay with me tonight? Always. Windsor Castle was even more imposing than Clara had imagined. All soaring towers and ancient stone, centuries of power radiating from its very walls. She and Adrian were escorted through endless corridors by silent footmen, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Finally, they reached a private drawing room, smaller than Clara expected, furnished with elegant simplicity. And there, standing by the window, was Queen Victoria herself. She was shorter than Clara anticipated, and younger, barely 40. Her dress was black mourning silk, her face serious but not unkind. She studied Clara with sharp, intelligent eyes. Your Majesties. Adrian bowed. Clara curtsied, not perfectly, but respectably. Thornbridge. The Queen's voice was crisp. You've caused quite a stir. I apologize, Your Majesty. It was never my intention to fall in love? The Queen's eyebrow arched. How very inconsiderate of you. But there was the faintest hint of humor in her tone. Rise, both of you. Both. We're not so formal here. They straightened. Clara kept her eyes lowered, her heart hammering. Mrs. Whitmore, forgive me, Duchess of Thornbridge, look at me. Clara raised her eyes to meet the Queen's gaze. There. That's better. I can't judge a person if they won't look at me. The Queen gestured to chairs. Sit. Tell me your story. And I want the truth, not the polished version your advisors have no doubt prepared. Clara glanced at Adrian, who nodded encouragingly. Then she began to speak. She told the Queen everything. The Loveless first marriage, the isolation, meeting Adrian at the lake, the decision to marry despite knowing the consequences, the fabricated charges, the battle in the House of Lords, the sickness in the village. She didn't try to make herself sound noble or heroic. She just told the truth, the messy, complicated, human truth. When she finished, silence hung in the room. Then the Queen spoke. You love him. Yes, Your Majesty. And you, Thornbridge, you love her? With everything I am, Adrian said quietly. The Queen studied them both. I married for love, against considerable opposition, I might add. My advisors thought Prince Albert unsuitable, a minor German prince with no real power or fortune. They said I was degrading the throne. Her expression softened. They were wrong. He's been my greatest support, my truest partner. The best decision I ever made was choosing him. Clara's breath caught. Was the Queen understanding? I don't approve of scandal, Victoria continued, her tone sharpening. And this marriage was scandalous, rushed, secretive, everything propriety dictates against. But she held up a hand as Clara started to speak. I also don't approve of false accusations, purchased testimony, or powerful men attempting to destroy women for refusing their advances. She stood, and they quickly followed suit. I've read the transcripts from the House of Lords hearing. I've had my people investigate Mr. Whitmore's claims. They're baseless, malicious. And the fact that you, Duchess, rode to London alone to defend yourself shows either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. Possibly both. Your Majesty, let me finish. Society has condemned you, but society often condemns what it doesn't understand. I'm prepared to offer my support, not my unqualified approval. You'll still need to prove yourself worthy of the position you now hold, but my support nonetheless. Clara felt the room spin. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say you'll work hard. Say you'll use your position for good. Say you'll be a duchess this realm can be proud of. The Queen's gaze was piercing. I hear you have medical knowledge, that you treated sick children when others would have kept their distance. I did what anyone should do. But most don't. That interests me. Victoria walked to her desk, retrieving a document. I'm establishing a commission to study public health in rural areas, disease prevention, sanitation, medical care for the poor. I want you to serve on it. Clara's jaw dropped. Me? But I'm not a doctor. I have no formal training. You have practical experience, and you understand both worlds, the aristocracy and the common people. That perspective is valuable. The Queen extended the document. This is an opportunity to prove your worth, Duchess. What you do with it is up to you. Clara took the paper with trembling hands. It was an official appointment bearing the royal seal. Thank you, she whispered. Your Majesty, thank you. Don't thank me yet. This commission will be scrutinized heavily. If you fail, it will reflect poorly on us both. But if you succeed, a small smile touched the Queen's lips. Well, then perhaps all those society matrons will have to admit they were wrong about you. The audience was clearly over. Clara and Adrian bowed and curtsied, backing toward the door as protocol demanded. But at the threshold, the Queen spoke once more. Duchess, one more thing. Clara turned. Your Majesty? Love is rare. True partnership, rarer still. Hold on to what you've found. Don't let the world convince you it isn't real." Clara's eyes burned with tears. "I won't, Your Majesty. I promise." The news of the Queen's support spread through London within hours. By the next morning, the tide had shifted dramatically. Invitations began arriving at the townhouse. Not many, but enough. Ladies who'd previously cut Clara in the street now sent calling cards. Lords who'd condemned Adrian now congratulated him on his marriage. It was transparent, opportunistic, and utterly predictable. But it was also proof that the battle had turned. "They're like weather vanes," Adrian observed, sorting through the pile of correspondence, "blowing whichever direction the wind comes from. Does it matter, as long as they accept us?" "I suppose not." He pulled her into his lap, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You did it. You won." "We're not done yet." Clara picked up the Queen's commission appointment. "I have work to do, real work. I can't just be a duchess in name, I have to be worthy of it." "You already are." "No, but I will be." She felt determination crystallizing inside her. "I'm going to make this commission matter. I'm going to help people. And I'm going to prove that someone like me, someone born common, can do just as much good as anyone with a title." Adrian smiled. "Then I'll help you, whatever you need." The work began immediately. Clara threw herself into the commission with fierce dedication. She traveled to rural villages, documenting living conditions, studying disease patterns, interviewing local healers. She compiled reports, made recommendations, argued with skeptical physicians who dismissed her ideas because she was a woman. It was exhausting, often frustrating, but it was also deeply fulfilling. And slowly, gradually, things began to change. Her recommendations for clean water access reduced cholera outbreaks. Her insistence on quarantine procedures contained a scarlet fever epidemic. Her partnership with local healers created a network of medical care that reached people who'd never had access before. The results were undeniable. Even her harshest critics had to admit, the common-born Duchess of Thornbridge knew what she was doing. 6 months after the Queen's appointment, Clara received another letter. This one from Lady Ashworth, the woman who'd predicted Clara would be destroyed. "Your Grace," it read, "I was wrong about you. I thought you would fail, would prove yourself unworthy of the position you'd claimed. Instead, you've done more good in 6 months than most peers do in a lifetime. I owe you an apology, and this letter serves as such. If you're ever in London, I would be honored to receive you." Clara read it twice, then showed it to Adrian. "She's apologizing," he said, sounding amazed. "More than that. She's acknowledging I've earned my place." Clara folded the letter carefully. "This is what we've been fighting for. Not just acceptance, respect. You've earned it, 100 times over." That evening, they held a dinner at Thornbridge for the commission members and local officials. It was Clara's idea, a way to bring together the aristocrats who funded the work and the common people who implemented it. The mix should have been uncomfortable. Dukes sitting beside village healers, ladies chatting with tenant farmers. But Clara made it work, moving between guests with ease, finding common ground, building bridges. Mrs. Ross watched from the doorway, her expression soft. "She's a natural," she murmured to Adrian. "She's remarkable," he agreed. At the evening's end, as guests departed, Clara stood in the entrance hall receiving thanks and farewells. One of the commission members, a physician named Dr. Hartley, who'd initially opposed her appointment, paused before leaving. "Your Grace, I must confess something. When you were first appointed, I thought it was a disaster. A woman with no formal training, elevated purely because of scandal and royal favor. I plan to oppose every recommendation you made." Clara braced herself for criticism, but Hartley smiled. "I was a fool. Your work has been exceptional. Your insights have saved lives. And you've taught me something important, that wisdom doesn't only come from universities and credentials. Sometimes it comes from lived experience and genuine compassion." He bowed deeply. "It's been an honor to work with you." After he left, Clara found Adrian in his study. She was exhausted but exhilarated, still wearing her dinner gown. "They respect me," she said, wonder in her voice. "Not because I'm your wife, not because the Queen supports me, because of my work." Adrian pulled her into his arms. "Because you're brilliant and dedicated and everything I always knew you were." Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I was so afraid. When we married, when the scandal broke, I thought we'd lost everything. We risked everything, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. And now? Now we've built something real, a partnership, a purpose, a life that matters. He tilted her face up to meet her eyes. You've changed Thornbridge, Clara. You've changed me. And you're changing England, one village at a time. She kissed him softly. We're doing it together. Always together. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the house quiet around them. Outside, snow began to fall, the first snow of winter covering the grounds in white. Clara watched it through the window, thinking about how far she'd come. From the desperate widow in a damp cottage to the Duchess of Thornbridge, respected physician, member of a royal commission. It still felt impossible sometimes, like a dream she might wake from. But Adrian's arms were solid around her. The work she'd accomplished was real. The lives she'd saved were real. This wasn't a dream. It was her life. The life she'd fought for, risked everything for, refused to surrender. And it was only the beginning. But the beginning she imagined didn't come easily. 3 days after the dinner, word reached Thornbridge that Cornelius Whitmore had been found dead in his study at Ravenshire Park. Heart failure, the doctor said. Clara felt nothing when she heard the news. Not relief, not sorrow, just a hollow emptiness where an enemy used to be. It's over then, Adrian said quietly. Is it? Clara looked up from the medical journal she'd been reading. He's gone, but everything he represented, the contempt, the cruelty toward anyone deemed lesser, that's still out there. Then we keep fighting it. But the fight took an unexpected turn when Cornelius's will was read. To everyone's shock, Ravenshire Park had been left not to another distant cousin, but to Clara herself. This must be a mistake, Clara said when Pemberton delivered the news. They were in Thornbridge's library, the solicitor looking uncomfortable as always. It's no mistake, Your Grace. The will is quite clear. Mr. Whitmore left the entire estate to you, with a letter attached. Pemberton produced a sealed envelope. He asked that this be given to you upon his death. Clara's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Adrian moved closer, reading over her shoulder. The letter was short, written in Cornelius's cramped handwriting. Clara, I won't insult you by calling this an apology. What I did was unforgivable, and we both know it. But in my final weeks, watching you transform yourself from victim to victor, I've come to understand something. You were everything I pretended to despise but secretly envied. Brave, honest, willing to risk everything for what you believed in. I was a coward who hid behind propriety and power. Ravenshire should have been yours from the beginning. Thomas married you, made you mistress of this house, then treated you like a servant. I continued that injustice. This is my attempt to correct it. Do with the estate what you will. Make it something better than it ever was under Whitmore hands. C.W. Silence filled the library. He left you Ravenshire, Adrian finally said. The place that cast you out. Why? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Why would he do this? Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. Adrian took the letter gently from her hands. It doesn't matter why. What matters is what you do with it. Clara walked to the window, looking out at Thornbridge's grounds. In the distance, she could see tenant cottages, smoke rising from their chimneys, people living their lives, trusting her and Adrian to care for them. I don't want it, she said. Ravenshire was never home. It was a prison. Then don't keep it. But Clara, think about what it represents. The estate that rejected you, now yours to command. That's not just property, that's power. She turned to face him. What would you do? I'd ask what would help the most people. The answer came to her suddenly, completely formed. A hospital, not a grand London institution for the wealthy, but a real hospital for common people. On Ravenshire grounds, where anyone who needs care can receive it, regardless of ability to pay. Adrian's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. And a medical college alongside it, where women can study medicine, where healers like Meg can formalize their knowledge, where we can train physicians who actually understand the people they're treating. Clara felt excitement building. We could change everything, Adrian, not just save lives, but create a whole new way of thinking about medicine and who deserves access to it. Pemberton cleared his throat. Your Grace, such an undertaking would be enormously expensive. Ravenshire's rents can fund it, and I have my own income from the commission work. Claire's mind was already racing ahead, planning. We'll need architects, builders, medical equipment. We'll need to recruit faculty, establish a curriculum. We'll need you to slow down and breathe, Adrian interrupted gently. This is a massive project, Clara. Years of work. Then we'd better start now, Chet. The announcement of Clara's plan ignited another firestorm of controversy. The aristocracy was scandalized, using a perfectly good estate for a charity hospital, allowing common women to study medicine. It was radical, dangerous, unseemly. But Clara had learned something important over the past year. The aristocracy's disapproval no longer had the power to destroy her. The Queen, however, had the power to support her. And she did, publicly and enthusiastically. The Duchess of Thornbridge has proven herself a woman of vision and compassion, Victoria declared in a formal statement. Her hospital and college will be a model for the realm. Construction began in the spring. Clara threw herself into every detail, reviewing architectural plans, selecting equipment, interviewing potential faculty. She worked 16-hour days, often falling into bed exhausted, only to wake at dawn with new ideas. Adrian worried about her, but he also understood. This wasn't just a hospital. It was Clara's answer to every person who'd ever told her she didn't matter, that her intelligence was worthless, that her common birth made her unfit for greatness. "You're going to work yourself to death," he said one evening, finding her at her desk at midnight, surrounded by building plans and medical texts. "I'm going to build something that lasts." Clara didn't look up from the drawings. "Something that will still be helping people long after I'm gone." Clara. Do you know what the mortality rate is for working-class women in childbirth? Nearly 1 in 8. 1 in 8, Adrian. They die because they can't afford doctors, because midwives lack training, because no one with power cares enough to change it. Now she did look up, and her eyes were fierce. This hospital will change that, and the college will train physicians who actually care about saving those women instead of dismissing them as unfortunate statistics. Adrian pulled up a chair beside her. "Then let me help. Tell me what you need." Together, they worked through the night, planning a future that had once seemed impossible. The construction took 2 years. 2 years of fighting skeptical builders, negotiating with resistant suppliers, overcoming 1,000 small obstacles. But Clara refused to compromise her vision. The hospital would be state-of-the-art, equipped with the latest medical technology. The college would accept students based on merit, not wealth or gender. And it would all stand on the grounds of Ravensshire Park, the estate that had once represented Clara's lowest point, now transformed into a symbol of hope. The opening ceremony was set for a June morning. Clara woke that day before dawn, too anxious to sleep. She dressed carefully in a deep green gown, not black mourning, not widow's weeds, but the vibrant color of new growth. Adrian found her standing at the window, watching the sunrise. "Nervous?" he asked. Terrified. "What if no one comes? What if this whole thing fails?" "It won't fail. You've built something extraordinary." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "And Clara, even if every aristocrat in England stays away, the people who matter will be there. The villagers, the tenants, the women who will finally have access to real medical care. That's what counts." The ceremony was scheduled for noon. They traveled to Ravensshire Park together, the journey strange and emotional for Clara. She hadn't been back since the day she was evicted, and seeing the estate now, transformed, purposeful, made her throat tight. The hospital building was beautiful. 3 stories of warm brick and large windows, designed to let in light and air. The college stood beside it, equally impressive. Between them, a courtyard had been created with gardens and benches where patients could recover in peace. People were already gathering. Clara's heart leapt when she saw the crowd. Not just local residents, but visitors from across the country. Physicians, healers, journalists, politicians. And there, arriving in the royal carriage, Queen Victoria herself. "She came," Clara whispered. "Did you really think she wouldn't?" Adrian squeezed her hand. "You've become one of her greatest success stories." The Queen greeted them warmly, then took her place at the front of the assembled crowd. Clara stood beside the hospital's entrance, her prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. But when she looked out at the faces, at Meg the healer, standing proudly in the front row, at the tenant farmers who'd supported her from the beginning, at the women who'd written letters thanking her for giving them hope. The words came naturally. 2 years ago, Clara began, her voice carrying across the courtyard, I stood in a damp cottage on the edge of this estate, believing my life was over. I had no money, no prospects, no future. Society had decided I was worthless, too poor, too common, too insignificant to matter. She paused, letting the words settle. But I refused to accept that judgment. With the help of the man I love, I fought back. I claimed a place in a world that didn't want me. And I discovered something important, that worth isn't determined by birth or wealth or title. It's determined by what we do with the opportunities we're given. Clara gestured to the buildings behind her. This hospital and college represent that belief. Here, no one will be turned away because they can't pay. No woman will be denied education because of her gender. No patient will be dismissed as unimportant because of their class. Here, everyone matters equally. The crowd was silent, listening intently. I know many of you opposed this project. You said it was too radical, too expensive, too ambitious. You said a woman, especially a common-born woman, couldn't possibly succeed at something so complex. Clara smiled. I'm grateful you were wrong. Laughter rippled through the audience. Even the Queen was smiling. This hospital is named Ravenshire Medical Center, in honor of the estate that made it possible. But it represents something larger than one place. It represents the idea that we can choose to be better than we've been, that we can build systems that serve everyone, not just the privileged few, that love, compassion, and determination can overcome even the most entrenched prejudice. She looked directly at the Queen. Your Majesty, thank you for believing in me when others didn't, for giving me the chance to prove what I could do. I hope this hospital makes you proud. Victoria nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. Clara turned to the ribbon stretched across the entrance. It is my honor to officially open Ravenshire Medical Center and the Thornbridge College of Medicine. May they serve this community and this nation for generations to come. She cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. And Clara, standing in the doorway of the hospital she'd built on the grounds of her greatest pain, felt something shift inside her. The last piece of the frightened, invisible woman she'd once been finally fell away. This was who she was meant to be. The celebration continued through the afternoon. Tours of the facilities, demonstrations of the medical equipment, meetings with prospective students. Clara moved through it all in a daze of joy and exhaustion. But the moment that mattered most came in the early evening, when the crowds had thinned and she found herself alone in the hospital's main ward. Meg appeared beside her, looking around with an expression of wonder. Never thought I'd see something like this in my lifetime. You made it possible, Clara said. Your knowledge, your experience. The college curriculum is built on what you taught me. Book learning and old wisdom together. Who'd have thought? Meg shook her head. You've done good, girl. Real good. We've done good. All of us. Clara gestured to the ward. This belongs to everyone who believed it was possible. A young woman approached hesitantly, one of the first students accepted to the college. Her name was Sarah, Clara remembered, daughter of a blacksmith. Your Grace, Sarah said, her voice trembling with excitement. I just wanted to thank you. My father, he said education was wasted on girls. Said I should marry and forget about books. But you've proven him wrong. You've proven we can do anything. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. You don't need to thank me. Just promise me something. When you become a physician, remember where you came from. Remember the people who don't have access to care, and help them. I promise. Sarah's eyes were bright with determination. I swear it. After she left, Adrian appeared at Clara's side. Ready to go home? Almost. Clara took one last look around the ward, at the clean beds, the modern equipment, the windows designed to bring in healing light. I just need a moment. She walked to the window and looked out at the grounds. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold. In the distance, she could see the old dower cottage where her journey had begun. It looked small from here, insignificant. But it had been the crucible where she'd forged herself into something new. Thank you, she whispered to her younger self, the frightened widow who'd made the brave choice to love despite the risks. Thank you for not giving up. Adrian's arms came around her. What are you thinking? That I almost let them destroy me. All those people who said I was worthless, who tried to make me believe I didn't deserve happiness or respect or love. I almost believed them. But you didn't. No. I chose to believe you instead. And that made all the difference. Clara turned in his arms. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I was unlovable. You stood with me when the whole world turned against us. How do I ever thank you for that? You already have. Every day, by being exactly who you are. Adrian's voice was thick with emotion. You've transformed Thornbridge. You've saved countless lives through your medical work. You've built a hospital that will serve people for generations. You've proven that love and courage can overcome anything. Clara, you don't need to thank me. I should be thanking you for choosing me, for making me better, for showing me what real partnership looks like. They stood together in the fading light, two people who'd defied every expectation and built something extraordinary from nothing but love and determination. 5 years later, Clara stood in the same hospital ward, watching a young mother hold her newborn child. The delivery had been complicated, but the skilled midwife, trained at Thornbridge College, had saved both their lives. You'll both be fine, Clara said, examining the infant with practiced ease. She's healthy and strong. Thank you, Your Grace. The mother's eyes were wet. My sister, she died in childbirth 2 years ago. Couldn't afford a doctor. If this hospital hadn't been here, but it is here, and it always will be. Clara squeezed the woman's hand gently. Rest now. You've both been through an ordeal. She left the ward and found Adrian waiting in the corridor. He was reading a letter, his expression serious. What is it? Clara asked. An invitation. The Royal Society of Medicine wants you to present your research on infection prevention at their annual conference. Clara's breath caught. The Royal Society, the most prestigious medical organization in England, and they wanted her, a woman with no formal degree, to present? They've been watching your work here, Adrian continued, the mortality rates you've achieved, the innovations in patient care. They can't ignore the results anymore. They can try. They could, but they won't. Adrian showed her the letter. Read it yourself. They're calling you a pioneer. Clara scanned the formal language, the respectful tone. This wasn't grudging acknowledgement. It was genuine recognition. 5 years ago, they would have laughed at the idea of me addressing them, she said quietly. 5 years ago, you hadn't built a hospital, established a medical college, and saved hundreds of lives. You've earned this, Clara. You've earned all of it. That evening, they walked through Thornbridge's grounds, as they had so many times before. But now, children ran through the gardens, their children, 3 of them, laughing and playing in the twilight. The eldest, a daughter named Grace, was already showing Clara's fierce intelligence. The twins, a boy and girl, had Adrian's quiet determination. They're going to change the world too, Adrian said, watching them. With you as their mother, how could they not? With us as their parents, Clara corrected. We're in this together, remember? Always together. They walked to the lake, their lake, where everything had begun. The willows were fuller now, the water peaceful in the evening light. Clara sat on the familiar rock, Adrian beside her. Do you remember the first time we met here? She asked. Every detail. You were examining willow bark, trying to look like you weren't crying. I was crying. Clara smiled at the memory. I felt so alone, so certain my life was over. And now? Clara looked back toward Thornbridge, where lights were beginning to glow in the windows. Beyond it, Ravenshire Medical Center stood proud against the darkening sky. And everywhere, in the villages, the tenant cottages, the college dormitories, were people whose lives had been changed by the work she and Adrian had built together. Now I know that endings can be beginnings, she said. That being discarded by one world means you're free to build a better one. That love isn't a weakness, it's the strongest force there is. She leaned against Adrian's shoulder. I was a widow with nothing to lose. And that freedom, that absolute rock bottom, gave me the courage to risk everything for something real. If I'd had wealth or position to protect, I might never have been brave enough. You would have been brave regardless. It's who you are. Maybe, but I'm grateful for the journey, every painful step of it. Clara looked up at the stars beginning to appear. Because it brought me here. To you, to our children, to work that matters. To a life I could never have imagined when I was standing alone in that cottage. Adrian kissed her forehead. You built this life. Every piece of it. I just had the wisdom to stand beside you and watch you become extraordinary. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell fully. In the distance, Clara could hear her children's laughter, could see lights burning in the hospital where patients were being cared for, could imagine students in the college preparing for tomorrow's lessons. This was her legacy. Not wealth or title, but change. Real, lasting change that would ripple forward through generations. She thought of the women who would become physicians because she'd opened that door. The patients who would live because of medical advances pioneered here. The children who would grow up knowing that birth didn't determine destiny. She thought of young widows in damp cottages, believing their stories were over, not yet knowing they could write new endings. And she hoped, fiercely, passionately hoped, that somewhere one of those women would find the courage to choose love over safety, purpose over propriety, life over mere survival, the way Clara had. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked. The future. All the lives we haven't saved yet, all the students we haven't taught, all the barriers we haven't broken. Clara smiled. We have so much work to do. Then we'd better get started. They stood, hand in hand, and walked back toward the house where their children waited, where tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that love and determination could change the world. Clara had been invisible once, discarded, dismissed, deemed worthless by every measure society valued. But she'd refused to stay invisible. She'd fought for her place, her happiness, her right to matter. And in doing so, she'd become something far greater than a duchess. She'd become a force for change, a symbol of possibility. Living proof that the world's judgment didn't define you, your choices did. And her choice? To love fiercely, fight boldly, and never accept the limitations others tried to impose, had transformed not just her life, but countless others. She'd been a widow with nothing to lose. Now she was a duchess with everything to give. And she was just getting started.